Hey everybody, Michael Park back with another After Effects tutorial for Digital Juice. Now if you know me, you know I love the effects in Harry Potter, specifically the Harry Potter movies. And as I was watching the Half-Blood Prince the other day with my daughter, I noticed that the end credits were really a cool treatment for titles. And since we have the new elements from Compositors Toolkit 3 have some of those cool kind of ink drop looks, I thought this would be a great tutorial to do. So let's go ahead and get started. Now here we are in After Effects, and as you can see, I already have some stuff in the composition. I've created a final composition which has the composition settings of about 26 seconds long. I'm at a frame rate of 23.976 frames per second. I have an aspect ratio 16:9, and I'm going with a little bit smaller comp today just to make things render a little bit faster. We're going with 640 by 360. I also have already created some text layers here as pre-compositions. As you can see, we just have a simple composition with one text layer in it, Digital Juice Presents, which will be our first text element. The next one will be a tutorial by Michael Park, which is our second text element. And the final one is featuring Compositors Toolkit 3. Once again, nothing fancy here, just text elements. The last thing that I have in here are these ink drop elements from Compositors Toolkit 3. Now, Compositors Toolkit 3 is all about liquids. Some really cool looking stuff, from ink drops to blood spatters to raindrops and water falling. Really neat stuff. We're going to be utilizing all ink drops. We've got ink drops 18, ink drops 22, 26, some kind of cool wispy looking stuff, 27, 28, and 33. So we'll be using these. All right, well, we need to go ahead and get started with our composition, and what better way to start than by grabbing a background. So let's create a new solid layer by hitting Layer, New Solid, or hitting Control Y. Let's rename this BG Radial, and we need to make it the comp size. The color doesn't matter, because to this we're going to add Effect, Generate, Ramp. And what we want to do is change the ramp shape from linear ramp to radial ramp. I want kind of a bright yellow spot in the middle going to kind of a darker orangish brown. So let's move the center down here a little off center to make it not quite so symmetrical. Move this point out to the edge. Now let's make the black a bright orangish yellow like that. Maybe not quite so bright. There we go. And let's make the end color here at the edges a dark kind of orangish brown color. There we go. Now I also want to create a little bit of a gradient that goes from orange to bright yellow here at the bottom. I'm going to basically duplicate this layer by hitting Control D. I'm going to rename this from BG Radial to BG Linear. I'm going to change the blending mode from normal to multiply, and immediately you can see we've got kind of this cool orange gradient going on. Now I don't want this to happen across everything. I don't want to just repeat this. What I want to do is change the ramp shape from radial ramp to linear ramp. And now what I'm going to do is create kind of this linear look from top to bottom. I like the orange color up here, but I want this to fade to that bright yellow color down below. And what we can do is change the end color from a dark shade all the way to white. And when you multiply white, you basically have no effect whatsoever. We can also kind of increase the intensity of the orange up here by simply sliding down, or even sliding and changing the color of our yellow from this brighter yellow to kind of a darkish orange yellow. There we go. So our background is now ready to go. The next thing I want to do is create a new camera. So let's choose Layer, New, Camera. We'll leave a 50mm preset, click OK. And also we're going to use a null object to animate our camera. So we'll choose Layer, New, Null Object, and we'll make this a 3D layer. Alright, let's parent our camera to our null and start in with some of our text. Let's go back to our project panel and grab one of the text pre-comps. We'll start with Digital Juice Presents. Drop that out here in the middle. Maybe pull it down here to the side like so, a little off center, and we'll leave it right there. Let's make it a 3D layer, and let's now bring in some of our text or our ink elements. Drop down our ink drops folder, and I'm going to start out with this ink drops 18. This is basically an image or a video file of all these cool ink drops coming down, and we're going to use this as a transition for our first text element. Hop back into our final composition and drop this in on top. Make it a 3D layer, and we're going to have to scale this down just a little bit. Maybe we can pull it down a little bit so we have more of the top section here. And we want to change the transfer mode from normal to multiply. Now, as you can see, this is a little bit gray, and the gray multiply is not quite as 100% opaque as I'd like. It gets a little bit washed out. The way we can adjust that is by selecting the layer and choosing Effect, Color Correction Curves. Now all we need to do is simply drag our curves down. As you can see, it darkens everything up. We do lose a little bit of the detail though in the wispiness. If you want to bring some of that detail back, simply create a contrast curve or an S curve. As you can see, we're bringing back some of the transparency in those grayer areas. So I think that will give us the look that we want. Nice. We also need to make this ink drop a little bit faster. As you can see, it only gets down about halfway through the screen, almost all the way through our composition. What we want to do is basically shorten the length of this video file. So let's right click and choose time stretch. Right now we have a stretch factor of 100%, which gives us a duration of over 1 minute. Let's knock that down significantly to about 8. And that gives us a duration total of 6 seconds or thereabouts. Now this ink drop comes down much faster. But I want this to be on screen for about 10 seconds. So while I like the speed that it comes down initially, I want it to kind of linger on here once it gets down. So let's add another time element to this by right-clicking and choosing Time, Enable Time Remapping. What we get are 2 keyframes which allow us to control the length of the clip. We can also then add in another keyframe and adjust those around so you effectively remap how the clip plays and the speed at which it plays. So right now I want this clip to come down all the way through and then just kind of linger right here. So let's set a keyframe. And like I said, I want this clip to be about 10 seconds long, so I'll stretch the end point out here to 10 seconds and then just extend the visibility of the clip to meet that end point. So the clip comes down fast and then just kind of hangs. Now this is kind of an abrupt change. You can see it comes down and then it really is noticeably slower right here. We want to make that a little bit smoother. So I'm just going to select the middle keyframe and hit F9 or right click and choose Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. If we go to the track editor here, you can see we get kind of a flat look here. We can adjust the curve a little bit to make that a little bit of a smoother transition. There we go. So now it comes down and just kind of gradually slows down. The next thing I want to do is to do our camera push or our initial camera move. So let's grab the null object and hit P to reveal the position. I'm going to go all the way here to the back, set a keyframe for the position. I'm going to back up to -200 or so. Now if we scrub through the timeline, let's see our ink effect is a little bit too small, so we need to scale that up a bit so we hit the edges and don't have any clipping there. So let's hit S to reveal the scale and scale this up so we get just outside the border of our composition. Perfect. Next, let's come down here in time, and I want there to be a transition between about 8 and 10 seconds. So what I want to do is have this camera push in past 7 seconds. So we'll have it push into about 8 seconds. So let's go ahead and adjust the camera's position and have this push in to maybe about 160. Looks good. So I have this nice camera push that comes in. And then what we're going to do is kind of whip pan across. I want to easy ease these keyframes by hitting F9 or right clicking and choosing Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. So now I have a nice smooth camera move, and we can go ahead and do some wispy treatment onto our digital juice text here. Let's go ahead and bring our digital juice text above our ink layer, and to it let's add Effect Generate Fill. What this will do is put red on top of our layer so that we can differentiate it from the background initially. We also want to add a new effect that I really don't see people use a lot. It is a pretty cool effect called the Liquify filter. Let's choose Effect, Distort, Liquify. And it seems apropos, since we are dealing with ink and liquid, to use the Liquify filter. So what we want to do is start here where this ink is kind of up top. And what we're going to do is we're going to basically push our text into the shape of these ink elements. So we have our tool selected, and we're going to turn on the distortion mesh here, and we're just going to basically start pushing this up into the shape. And what it basically does is the filter creates a mesh or a grid, and it just remaps the grid into whatever shape we push it into. And you can see the grid by going to View Options, View Mesh. You can see we're really kind of stretching this out. And sometimes this is helpful to view the mesh to see exactly what you're doing. So I want to kind of push all this up. It's easier to see without the mesh on, perhaps. So push all this up to make it look the shape of our ink here. There we go. And then as we come down here in the timeline, we can turn the distortion mesh percentage down. It'll basically look like it's filling into the original shape that we want. Now hit U to reveal the keyframes, and we can go back here to the very beginning and turn that distortion percentage back up to 100%. And then if we let it play, you can see it kind of comes down and looks like the ink flowing down. Alright, so now that we have that, we can turn the fill color back to kind of a black color to match up. Now you can animate the opacity to this, or you can simply hit Alt open bracket to trim the layer, and then as you can see it kind of comes down and flows into place. Now it flows a little bit too linearly, and we want to easy ease that, so we'll just simply grab the back end of this and hit F9 or right click and choose keyframe assistant easy ease. So now it should just kind of slide into position. Very cool. One last thing we might want to do to this is maybe add a little bit of a vector blur to this. So we'll choose Effect, Blur and Sharpen, CC Vector Blur. And if we solo the layer and turn on the opacity here, we can increase the amount, and you can see we're just kind of blurring things out a little bit. We can set a keyframe for the amount. Once again, hit U twice to reveal our new keyframe. Move this down, and then just have this gradually fade off. Turn that amount down to 0. We'll unsolo the layer. As you can see, just adds a little bit more of a wispy look to our composition. Alright, we got our first text treatment done. Now we're ready to move on to our second one. And we need to actually move, so let's grab another new null object by choosing Layer, New, Null Object. Once again, we'll make this a 3D layer. And we're going to drop this down on top of null layer 1, and then parent the null layer 1 to null 2. What this allows you to do is to have easy ease keyframes without the crazy kind of boomeranging that goes back and forth. That stuff drives me nuts. Alright, so we want to have this start whip panning over at about 7 seconds and finish up at about 9 seconds. Let's hit P to reveal the position of null 2, set a keyframe by left clicking the stopwatch of the position, come on over about 2 seconds from 7 to about 9, and then move this position over quite a bit so that our first ink layer goes off screen. We'll go over here to about 1,000 pixels or so, which should give us plenty of room. Once again, let's easy ease the keyframes so we get a nice kind of smooth transition. And what I want to do is use some of the ink elements to kind of visually push us to the side. So let's go back and pick one of these elements that kind of pushes over, like 26 here. I think that's a pretty good candidate. So we'll drop 26 onto our timeline. We're going to change our mode from normal to multiply. And as you can see, it gives us kind of a green hue because we had a lot of blue in that element. We can go ahead and take care of that by adding Effect, Color Correction, Tint, which will basically just make it all black and white. You get rid of any of that green hue. Also, this is quite a bit too big, so we can decrease the size down. And once again, this is really a long clip. So we can change that by selecting the layer, right-clicking, choosing Time, Time Stretch. This time we'll stretch this down to about 30%, maybe even 25%, make it a lot faster. And we can always use the time remapping feature once again if we need to. Bring it down here, make it a 3D layer. Let's hit W on the keyboard to grab our rotate tool. And we'll rotate around this in the Z axis so it looks like it's pushing up this way. And move it down this way. Go here to our whip pan And I'm going to scale this down even more. I just want to kind of have this look about the same size as everything else. Have this push down. And I want this to go all the way off screen because you can see it kind of clips at the edge, and I don't want to see that. So we'll push this over even a little bit more, maybe differentiate it from the background a little bit by pulling it forward so we get a little bit of parallax. Kind of line it up time-wise so as the camera starts moving, it starts pushing across. There we go. And I'm going to duplicate this layer by hitting Control D. I'm going to move this over and kind of line it up to make it look like it's coming out and pushing out of the old layer here. Once again, we're going to have to remap this time-wise a little bit. And what I'm going to do is use the pan behind tool to move the center of this to where the kind of the stem of this ink flow is. Grab this move tool again and push this back. And now what we can do is line this up with this kind of ink blob right here. It's coming out. So it kind of comes out and looks like it's pushing across. And seeing as it's clipping right here, we don't want to see that. And there's really not much we can do about it. But since we moved our pan behind tool, we can actually animate the scale of this layer to give us the illusion that this is getting bigger, and we can hide the edge that way. Let's hit S to reveal the scale. We're going to start right here as it's coming on and set a keyframe for the scale. Now we'll come down in time to where it's almost off the edge, and we'll just increase the scale out so we no longer see the edge in frame. So you can see right there we're good to go. So now we have a nice whip pan coming through, the ink pushing us across, and then this ink exploding sideways and coming through. Now what we're going to do is use another ink effect to bring on our second title. And this time, let's go back and grab a tutorial by Michael Park and drop that out. Make it a 3D layer. Now as you can see, it disappeared because it reset it at the center point, which is way over here right now. There's a couple different things that you can do. You can either just simply go over and drag it over, or since we have our ink layer here in roughly the right position, we can hit P to reveal the position of that, select it and hit Control C to copy it, and then just simply paste it onto our layer, which will bring it over, and then reposition it. And I think what I'm going to have is one of our ink drops here. We'll use maybe 28, drag that out, pop that on top, make it a 3D layer, hit Control V to paste the position, and we're going to need to scale this down quite a bit. It's pretty big. And maybe have this push over from the side, so let's rotate this around like this, scale it up. It's a little bit small. We don't want to see either of these edges here, so scale it up even bigger. There we go. Change it to multiply. And what we'll do is just have this kind of reveal the text. We don't really need to make it too inky. As you can see, this one's pretty slow too. So let's right click and choose time stretch, drop this down to about 20% so that it blows across fairly quickly. And we'll reset this over right like that. And like I said, I'm just going to have this reveal the text below it. So we're going to use a linear wipe. So select the text layer here and choose Effect, Transition, Linear Wipe. And turn up the transition completion. And we need to flip this around to -90 so it gets revealed by that. Maybe feather that out 5 pixels or so. Scrubbing the timeline until it starts coming across. Increase the transition completion so it's off. Set a keyframe and also hit Alt, open bracket to trim our layer. Come down in the time, decrease the transition completion. Alright, so now that we have our text there, I think maybe what we want to do is push our text back a little bit in space because we want to have a nice camera push in on this too. So let's go back here, hit P to reveal the position, and then just kind of push this back a little bit. Maybe about 120 or so. And just make sure that our reveal still lines up okay. And it looks like it's pretty close. You can always tweak that if you need to. Once again, we're going to add another camera push, and this time, since we have Easy Ease keyframes on our Null 2, if we tried to animate this, it could give us a boomerang, and that's just annoying to deal with, and it's so hard to get rid of. easier thing to do is to simply add another new null object. Once again, we'll bring this down, pop it in on top of the null 2, if I can. There we go. And make it a 3D layer. Let's hit P to reveal the position, and I'm just going to bring it over to where the null 2 is right now, which is at 1000 in the X. I'm going to parent null 2 to null 3, come back here to where this just starts coming on, and I'm going to set a keyframe for the position, and then as this comes on all the way through about 20 seconds or so, maybe 16 seconds, we're going to push in on this null. Bring up our title action safe to make sure we're not getting illegal here. I think that looks pretty good. 130. And once again, we'll easy ease the keyframes. And now what we want to do is actually make another camera move that we're going to drop down and then rotate 90 degrees to give us just a little more interesting look. So let's create another new null object by choosing layer, new null. Make this a 3D layer. Hit P to reveal the position, move it over to 1000, just like we did with null 3. Going to drop it down on top of null 3. And we're also going to hit Shift R to bring up the rotation parameters and the position. Let's set a keyframe for the position and for the Z rotation. Then hit U twice to reveal just those. And right before, maybe between 15 seconds and 17 seconds, we'll create this camera move. So 1513, and then we'll come down here to 1713. And we'll move in the Y direction. Whoops, we need to parent our null here. Parent null 3 to null 4. And then we'll move in the Y direction down quite a bit. And we're also going to rotate 90 degrees or so. Create kind of a cool camera move. So you'll come, then all of a sudden you'll rotate down. I don't think we moved down far enough in the Y direction, so we'll just come down here to the end of the position, just move even further. There we go. Be quite a kind of an abrupt rotation. There, much better. Let's easy ease these. Right click keyframe assistant easy ease or hit F9. So now we have this nice cool transition. And we're going to transition into our next text element, but before we do that, what I want to happen is I want there to be a couple kind of ink effects that we rotate through. So we're going to grab another ink effect. This time we'll grab maybe ink drop 33 and pop that in on top. Make it a 3D layer. Move it over here. Probably need to scale it down quite a bit. And change the mode to multiply. And once again, we've got that blue look. So let's go ahead and affect color correction tint to get rid of that kind of shading. There we go. And make this a little bit faster. Right click, choose time. It's pretty similar stuff here. Time stretch. Move it down to about 35% or so. So this is kind of dropping through. And we don't want there to be any hard edge here. So we'll start about here as it rotates across. And I think I want this bigger. So we've got a hard edge here, so we can just move this forward a little bit so we clear that hard edge. There we go. So now we're just basically creating just a little more cool look visually here. We're rotating through this kind of inky look. And now we're ready for our final text element. So come in here and drop in our next text element, which will be featuring Compositors Toolkit 3. Once again, we need to make this a 3D layer. Hit P to reveal the position. And now we need to go to our null 4 and grab the position by hitting Control C. And paste that in, Control V. And we can basically just get rid of this top first keyframe and then turn off our position keyframe so it stays where it is. Hit W to grab our rotate tool, rotate this around. And let's just hit R to reveal the rotation, make sure that's 90 degrees. Hit P to reveal the position, and we're just going to push this back in Z space. And this time we're simply going to have this rotation reveal that text layer. And then after we're done, we're going to have basically a bunch of ink fall down and push it off. So let's go ahead and take care of that. right at about 23 seconds or so. We're going to go back to our 18 ink drops. Drop that on top and make it a 3D layer. Hit P to reveal the position, grab the position of this, Control C, Control V. We're going to need to rotate this around, so hit R to reveal the rotation. We'll rotate it on the Z axis like that. We also want to make this much faster once again, so let's right click and choose time, time stretch. We'll go to 7 this time, so it's really quick and comes across. Maybe even faster. Go time, time stretch, 4. And we need to change the transfer mode to multiply. Grab Effect, Color Correction Curves, because it's a little bit light and not quite as dark as we want it. So we'll darken that up. And this time what I'm going to do is duplicate this layer a couple times, maybe 3 times. And we're going to offset this in time. And we're also going to grab the position of this and kind of move it over a little bit. Move this one maybe down a hair and over. And the idea is just to have this all fill into black. Maybe duplicate it again. Here. Move it over, scale it up a little bit. Let's hit P to reveal the position and just kind of stagger these in Z space a little bit. So these will all come through, and then once it gets really dark, what we'll do is grab Layer, New, Solid, make it black. We're just going to use this as a fader. And hit T to reveal the opacity, set an opacity keyframe, move back a couple frames, set that down to 0. So it just kind of fades to black. There we go. We're going to also use this to fade everything on. So we'll set a keyframe for 100%, move down a few frames, drop that down to 0%. So it just kind of fades on and the ink drops. There we go. So as our layers drop on top, I think it'd be cool to have this look like it's getting pushed. So once again, we're going to turn to our liquify filter, grab our text and choose Effect, Distort, Liquify. Set keyframes for the distortion mesh, and then just start distorting this thing. So we just start kind of pushing this down. And remember, this is going to happen really fast. This is just going to be kind of noticeable a little bit, but not too much. It won't look like it's getting pushed. So come down a few frames. So we'll just kind of push this stuff down just to make it look like it's getting shoved by our ink effect here. Keep it kind of below everything. There we go. Move down a couple more frames. And then just basically shove it on off. We can probably increase our brush pressure here so that we get a little more responsiveness. There we go. Come down a few more frames and just push it completely off. There we go. Now if we scrub through the timeline, you can see it looks like the ink is coming in and distorting everything and pushing it down and off. It's a fitting end to our masterpiece here. Alright, so we have basically everything that we need, and it's time now just to put on a few finishing touches. And I noticed we didn't do a push in here for our final text treatment, and I think I want to. So what we need to do is create a new null object by choosing Layer, New, Null Object. Null 5, we'll drop this down right above Null 4. Make it a 3D layer. Hit P to reveal its position, and just copy the position of Null 4 by hitting Control C, Control V. Delete the first part here so it lines up right, and then we're going to parent Null 4 to Null 5. We'll scrub back here before Null 4 eventually stops. Let's set a keyframe for position or Null 5 right there, and let's scrub down here in the timeline to the very end, and we'll just push forward maybe about 150 pixels and adjust accordingly. So we're here, it's kind of pushing in, then everything pushes down. Once again, we'll set Easy Ease keyframes by hitting F9 or right-clicking and choosing Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease. There we go. Alright, so we have our title treatment done. The last thing I want to do is basically turn on motion blur for all of our layers just to tie everything in a little bit better. So let's just hit Control A to select all of our layers, turn on motion blur for them all, and enable motion blur in our timeline. So now when we have a quick movement like this, we will have all of our elements blurred just to give us a more natural look. Now, no video would be complete without a little soundtrack, and fortunately we have some great tunes from Digital Juice's Music Box 1. We're going to use Southern Prelude version A. We're going to drop that in. It's a kind of a nice, easygoing soundtrack that'll flow nicely with our ink flows. Drop that in and go ahead and render this baby out. Well, there you have it, a cool title treatment with some nice ink flows and some smooth transitions. Well, I hope you learned some cool stuff today. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comments section. Not only does leaving comments help me know what you like or dislike or want more information about, but it also automatically enters you for some great free giveaways from Digital Juice. As always, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, this has been Michael Park for Digital Juice.